Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, what's today, January 26th meeting of the Finance Committee. Pursuant to the Governor's order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Paragraph 20, as well as the Select Board's emergency order dated March 16th, 2020, the Finance Committee will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the town's webpage within 24 hours in accordance with the Governor's emergency action requirement of keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that all participants remotely attending this meeting please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. At this time, a roll call attendance vote will be taken. Mr. Alfred.
Present.
Mr. Maxwell.
Present.
Ms. Zemer.
Here.
Ms. Nersessian.
Yep, here.
Mr. Whitaker.
Present.
Mr. Murphy.
Here.
And I, as always, am here, so we're now officially convened. So first up are the minutes. We have a whole backlog. I would hope that with the, thank you, Mark, for the incessant reminders that we were promised. As I said, I just wanted to quickly look at the 20th because that was one that was updated. So, but I would encourage anybody who hasn't looked at them to look at them now, and we'll just do one motion to approve a whole bunch of minutes. But as I said, I want to just take a quick look at the 20th of October, just to see if there's.
Could I fill you in on the changes that Sue asked for? Would that be helpful?
Yes, on the 20th. That's the one I was curious about.
So the first change was she had suggested that where Tina Hines stated that Director of Youth, et cetera, should be under a separate heading of Select Board updates, which I think I had changed that to it. Changed it to that. And then the second one was in the same paragraph. She just stated, "This should there be more of this? It's just a statement, but nothing more." And that, I mean, that's up to all of you. I think it's fine, but whatever works. And then lastly, further in the same general paragraph, but the next page down, she had suggested that should this be a new paragraph? It's a new topic, and I just inserted a new paragraph there, so that was edited up.
Okay, so content-wise, there wasn't really much changed.
No, it was just trying to separate out sort of ideas, right? Topics that we were covering, because it didn't, the way it was worded, it was talking about one topic and it almost looked like it was the end of that because we didn't resolve it and then it went into the next thing. So it almost made it seem like Tina ignored your comment, Ken, and I didn't want, because she didn't, and I didn't want it to look like that.
Yeah, so I wouldn't have taken offense to that anyway.
No, I know, but I didn't, these are minutes, right? So
yes. Okay. So let me see. So Mark, you have the list of all the, now I would caution that there were two sets of executive session minutes. Both of those pertain to matters that are still before the town. So what I would recommend, and I'll let Mark list the dates, but that the motion be that we approve the minutes of the dates provided by Mark over all those meetings, and release all but the two executive session minutes of that bundle. And you can give the dates of those two executive sessions, Mark.
The two executive session dates were.
Well, no. Do you understand what I'm saying? The motion has to be that we approve all of them, but that we release all but the following two dates executive session meeting minutes. Just make that clear in the motion.
So moved.
Well, give me the date. Give us the dates. Put the dates down.
So the first date was 10/20. The second date was 10/27, with an executive session on 10/27.
Okay.
The third date was 11/10. The fourth date was 11/17. The fifth date was 12/1. Sixth date was 12/5. Seventh date was 12/15. And then executive session was also on 12/15.
Okay.
And then there was one more, I'm sorry, it was January, I'm sorry, it'll take a second.
It was 2 weeks ago. So it was what, January 12th?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the motion would be to approve all those meeting minutes and release all but the October 27th executive session meeting minutes and the December 15th executive session meeting minutes.
So moved.
Okay, so I have a second for that. Okay, you got a second that? Okay. Let's proceed to a vote on that. Mr. Alfred?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Ms. Emer?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Yes, except I have to abstain on, I think it's November, I'm just trying to find, November 17th, I think, because I was absent.
Okay.
Yep, November 17th. So I abstain on that and yes to the others.
Okay. Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy? You're muted.
Yes. Sorry.
Okay, and I vote yes. So now we're all caught up on minutes, which is a good thing. Okay. So are there any other administrative things? I don't think we have anything. We just had to catch up on the minutes. So we can get right to the budget reviews. And obviously we start the process of the FY22 budget prep in terms of the receiving budget requests. Obviously we started on the process a little while ago. So we'll start out with us, and I will tell you that for us, Sharon asked me, should we change our budget? I said, no, there's no reason for us to be changing our budget. We have not fully expended our budget in prior years because we haven't had Nancy or an equivalent of Nancy for a while. So if the committee is fine with that, then we'll put in our recommended budget as flat with last year. So
Makes sense to me.
So we'll do that. The next was the other one we own, of course, the reserve fund. My suggestion to Sharon was that, she said, obviously we cranked it up for FY21 because of the pandemic. 22, we don't need to keep it that high because we're going to be planning for that and we're going to have a much better picture of what's going on with the pandemic. We were going to bring it back down. I suggested to Sharon that we bring it to 325 because we've had it at 315 for a long time. And every year we go through the question of how to end up at 315. So I was like, we might as well take the opportunity to round it to 325 and make it something.
It was even worse at one point. It was like 312 and a half or something.
Yeah.
It was it grated on me.
So that's why I said if everybody's fine with that, we'll go with we'll keep the reserve fund we'll put the reserve fund at 325 for FY22 in our recommendation. And I'm just going to pull that up. Just give me a second here. I'm just going to keep track of the requests here. So for us, our budget would be 1525 for the FinCom, and for the reserve fund would be 325, which was what we had in our model anyway. So, okay. So those are our two budgets. Now we can go on to the select board controlled ones. So Travis, you want to go through celebration? And by the way, we talked briefly about the Google Drive stuff, all the stuff that Travis is preparing on the select board budgets, the select board owned budgets. And I don't know if you're going to put other stuff in there too, Travis, but that's in that Google Drive folder. So if you have access to it, you can follow along, just pulling them up from the Google Drive.
Yeah, so I think what we figured out, and I was going to talk to Sue about it here today, although I think Dan just pinpointed it at the top here, and I had one other person also request access. If you're requesting access, it means that you're using a different Google account. I can give that access to you if that's easier for you, not a problem. But if it's giving you that, all the access was granted to your FinCom accounts, which are Google accounts, obviously. So I think that was the roadblock. But if anybody needs access, just let me know, and then obviously I can just email them if it's easier. It was 8 of them, so I just figured Google Drive would be easiest.
And it's very easy to switch. At the bottom it says sign in as, and if you just click on that, it'll bring up any other accounts that you also have.
Perfect. Yeah, it must have been my Babson account that it was pulling from. So even though I clicked it from my FinCom one, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I did the same thing. It just did.
It must automatically default. So, okay, thank you.
No, and that makes sense. I'm glad it wasn't something that I was doing. So,
well, I'm glad you said contact me if you had problems. So that was easy.
All right. So do you want me to pull them up here, Ken?
If you want to. I mean, obviously these are budgets that are, it's up to you how much in depth. I mean, celebrations is literally one $2,000 line item. So it's not something we need to spend 4 hours on, right? So
yeah. And so the only thing I would say there, the discussion that we had, I did put together a little narrative on it for most of these, just so, anybody who had a question on it could see. But, essentially for celebrations, they spend more than $2,000. $2,000 is essentially the town's contribution to it. So generally speaking, they'll go up to about $5,000 in total expenditure. Anything above the $2,000 that's in the town's budget would be paid for out of the Friends group. This is obviously also, as you're all,
Actually, I don't mean to interrupt you, Travis, but what I would say is go ahead and share it, because I was just thinking for anybody that watches this meeting later, this way they can see what we're talking about.
sure.
It's easier for me to follow along separately, but then I was like, if you share it, then somebody who watches the video will be able to see what you're talking about.
All right. So this is just a little write-up. For the smaller ones, it's really not that necessary. But so we're talking about primarily, we call it celebrations, but it's about the Memorial Day. Historically, that's been a luncheon, and then wreath and flowers are covered. General run rate is about $5,000. This line is for $2,000. Anything above gets paid for by the two veterans posts. In May of last year, the luncheon had to be canceled. Obviously, lunch being or eating meals during COVID has been one of the things that gets automatically canceled. And I don't think that's going to be happening in this May either, most likely. But by May 22, certainly the hope would be that the luncheon can be back on. Wreaths and flowers were purchased last year and would be purchased this year and 22 as well. So it's essentially a flat request. I did ask, as we're coming hopefully on the other end of COVID, if there would be any sort of other request. But the answer was no, the request is still $2,000.
Okay. Any questions about this one? If not, then just keep moving forward. Go on to liability insurance.
Okay. So liability insurance, a little more costly. And we are with Maya. Hold on one second. Liability insurance. All right. So I just put some information in here for your information, just for sort of context. But we're insured through Maya. Maya is the Massachusetts Interlocal Insurance Agency. It's pretty much the best show in town for municipal governments, although the private sector has been creeping in, and I could see us bidding this out to make sure that, we're keeping Maya sharp, or, if there is a private sector option that we can get into. I've taken one meeting of people looking for our business, so I'll continue to look for those opportunities. For 22, certainly we would plan on staying with Maya. I just put the deductibles here so you can sort of see when we do need to use it, what's coming out of relative budgets, right? So if a police vehicle got in an accident, we use Maya, they'd be paying $1,000 deductible out of their budget. The workers' compensation and police, fire, and special risk accident insurance is also through Maya, but it would not be in this particular line item. That would be elsewhere in the budget that we'll cover later. We do use Maya quite a bit. When I say it's the best show in town when it comes to municipalities, their Flex Grant program is pretty easy to use. And I think I covered previously, we did get $10,000 towards the facility manager's Dude Solutions. That was a cost that we were going to incur anyway. We essentially got $10,000 towards it because they recognize it, as a best practice that we're going to be managing our assets in a better way. And so, those types of things are another benefit to being with Maya. There is no staffing specific to this. It's done through my office. And this, let me go down to the request. This amount, we have seen increased usage, but it is also an amount that their board meeting will be later in the year. And so this is based on, where we are at the moment, but I don't see this going up. If anything, it would go down. And at this point, this is what I would assume for FY22.
Okay, so how much of that, that's the full payment, and we get the discount. We've been applying that to our, in other words, is this the discounted rate taking into the prepayment discount, or is this the full rate, not taking advantage of the pay upfront discount that they give us?
This does not include the pay upfront discount.
Okay. Do the prior years?
So if you look at the FY21 budget of 275, and then the expended amount, this can still go up because there can be other costs, but essentially I would take this as the full amount was budgeted, and then the turn back is going to be including the discount. So I believe in 21, it was the full amount got budgeted, and then this is what's been expended.
Have you looked into? I mean, that's just a huge increase since 2019, though. Of course, it's coming off of a decrease from 2018. Mm-hmm. What is the formula as far as when we use it? Because I know we've had a decent number of pipes burst in town hall and things like that. Like, is there some sort of formula that if you don't use it for a few years, it goes down? If you use it, it goes. I mean, is that basically?
Yeah. So we do. I do run through, and I did that pretty much my first month here was to go through the loss report. And so, we have used it. Maya has been contacted. I've had 2 instances since I've been here, storm related. So, we are certainly, I would say, getting our money's worth, but at the same point, we need to continue to take advantage of the opportunities to reduce our risk. And so, the risk analysis that's done on an annual basis, we need to go through all the claims that we've had and we use it. And that's sort of, that's what we're seeing the end result of.
But 188 to 289 in, what is it, 3 years, 4 years? That's huge. I'm just wondering, but it came down from 2018. So why did it come? I mean, I know you weren't here in 2018, but why did it come down from 2018? Is it more tied into usage, or is there like historical usage at more than like a homeowner's insurance might be, or something like that? Because homeowner's insurance doesn't really ever come down, right? I mean, you're not going to like.
Yeah, I'm looking at I have the FY21 risk analysis and sort of going through all of our claims and those types of things, but I'd have to go back to 2018 to see, why the number was so much lower at that point. I mean, this covers pretty much everything in town, and we have, blanket coverages that cover like our open space and those types of things. So, I mean, I can certainly look at if we have too much coverage, but I don't know why 18 was so low.
Like when we added was it 1450 Washington?
17.
That's what I was just going to say. I wonder if it was changing the coverage.
Yeah.
Things we had covered.
And I know we've added 1 or 2 police cruisers and some other stuff.
Well, there was also there's been police cruisers. There are new fire trucks, things like that. Like, I don't know. That's why I said I don't know the details.
But not net new fire trucks, right?
Well, not net new, but when you're replacing a 25-year-old, I mean, try replacing a 20-year-old car with a new one and seeing what it does to your insurance, right? So
a lot more can break on.
That was going to be my comment. I don't know, but I'm just saying that's something that Travis. If I had to take a wild guess, I'd say it was some change in either our levels of coverage or things that were being covered. Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, Travis can obviously dig into that.
You need to dig into so it depends on some of this. But that being said, given everything that we're planning in town, it would be good to get a handle of that because $100,000 over a few years is not insignificant. And if we're going to start doing significantly more, I don't know, is it more expensive to insure new sidewalks? Okay, come on. Come on.
I have no idea. But the other thing I was going to say.
But seriously, is it more expensive to insure different things that we're planning and just sort of keeping some of this stuff in mind because it may have a further impact in the operating?
I'll add to the insurance with the sidewalks. There's a liability thing. It makes it very hard to sue a town or a city. If you trip on a sidewalk, it's not worth it. It's capped at some small de minimis amount. So highly unlikely you're going to find a lawyer willing to help you go after it. It's just set so that there's no incentive. So.
Okay, and rather than turn this into a discussion of sidewalks, what I will say is that it is a salient point that if we're considering like expansions of services or other types of projects, that we understand whether that would have an impact on our liability insurance, right? What I was going to ask was the more obvious thing, which is what about COVID, right? I mean, that's been debated at the federal level about liability protections. Obviously, there's going to be, my guess is there's going to be a lot of litigation flying around when things start to settle down about people trying to get money for injury they suffered at work if they got COVID, they think they got COVID at the workplace. things like that. I'm like, has Maya had any conversations, not necessarily with us, but just general informational things about, what happens if, let's say a town hall employee gets COVID and they claim it's from being a town hall and then they sue us, right? Or something like that. Now, do we know how that's being handled?
So I think, as I mentioned off the top, this does have coverages outside of just the liability insurance. I think what you're describing, and I think what the case law is probably going to be, as you said, in the next 18 months at least, bearing out, is going to probably be on the workers' comp side. But that being said, Maya does provide us with updates on any changes in case law and those types of things on a consistent basis. And so we work with them. So yeah, I mean, they've been providing us information, but there has been no case law to date of what you're describing. But if there was, we would hear from Maya about it, and I think it would hurt the workers' comp budget most likely from what you've just described.
Yeah, well, because that's my concern. Like, I could see where, at some level, and again, I'm not going to speculate, but I could see where you could say, okay, someone's eligible for workman's comp if they got sick, got COVID on the job or something like that, or it counts as right. I'm worried more about the person that says, oh, I'm a COVID long hauler and I got it at work, so I want $5 million to cover my, the fact that I, can't run my marathon next year like I wanted to, or something like that, So we'll wait and see how that plays out. But I was just curious as to whether Maya's, paying attention to that, because everybody knows that's going to be the thing that's going to happen the second. I don't think the lawsuits are flying yet, because the pandemic is still ongoing and getting your day in court is really difficult right now. But I think that once getting your day in court becomes easier, then we're going to suddenly start seeing lawsuits flying. So,
no, I think the lawsuits are flying.
Oh, yeah, I just haven't heard about that. And I haven't heard much about it. But anyway, okay. Any other questions about the liability insurance budget? Okay, then let's move on to economic development. I see Peter has been patiently waiting, although we are technically getting him on 11 minutes earlier. So we're ahead of schedule. Go ahead, Peter. Okay, unless you're covering it, Travis. I don't know. Do you decide how you're gonna?
Yeah, there's not a lot to deal with in this case. We've carried forth the $200 in supplies, and at this point in time, we don't have a staff person. The committee is in the process of reviewing the job description. We've talked to Travis, and he has checked out Hopkinton. We're trying to look at everything, even in the nature of trying to share a position with another community. So probably within the next month, we'll have a job description and figure out what we're going to do for that $13,008, which would be to fund a staff person to assist us in grants, and also the administration of the business grant program that has been approved by the legislature.
Okay.
So it's level funded with, basically all but $200 into the purchase, but that may shift before town meeting. We will let you know as far as whether that will go into personal service.
Okay. The one question I had about that was, I know that the professional service rate was based on Karen filling the position. So are we going to revisit? I don't know what the rate wants, if you're hiring someone separately for that, is it at the same rate that you were paying Karen, or is it,
but Karen decided middle of last year, she didn't want to do the job anymore. So as of June 30th, she has not been providing support. So this year you're going to get some money back because we haven't spent any personal, line item under this year's budget. I don't see anybody in town to fill the position, because we're looking for something more than just, filling secretarial staff type thing. So exactly what the number's going to be, we don't know, but certainly we know we got to keep it, within that $13,000.
okay.
So whatever the rate will be, we'll just limit the number of hours we can get the person to do the work.
Right. I'm just saying that especially if you're comparing to other towns that may have a similar position or something, I'm just saying that you want what you probably want to do at some point is recalibrate to the rate of a position that would be that position. You know what I mean? Like it was dictated before by the person filling the position. So you may find that as you said, maybe it's more or less money, whatever, but at some point you want to recalibrate it to the, to what the position really should be paid for on its own. So go ahead, Mr. Alfred.
So at a minimum, I would hope that we would have the person on, the start of the year. So we probably got to, advertise and all that stuff, and there's certainly enough money in our existing budget to cover that.
So I apologize. I forgot about this. But
I was going to say somebody's got their speakers way up.
When she started taking hours, Karen started taking hours here. Were those additional hours, or are some of her hours shifted over to here?
Karen slowly over time had been reducing her hours, and I forget how much the last budget included her as far as the number of hours, but it's not that much, particularly if you're talking, a quote semi-department head level. It's not like we're going to have.
No, this is actually probably more of a question for Travis. Did the town? I guess another way of saying it is the town reabsorbing this $14,000 in her original department, or is she just down hours?
She's down hours.
Okay. So these were increased hours when you started doing this.
So we have a couple department heads that are split between departments. Like think Sean Reese gets split between DPW, tax supported, and then water, right? So Karen was split between the planning budget and then was charged some hours to this budget. And the reason, and I think, Ken's point is valid, which is we're going to assume this is going to go to somebody that is not specifically the town planner. We should base it on that rate. It has not changed at all, obviously, is that the department head rate from 21 to 22 has not changed at the moment, nor did it change from 20 to 21. So that's why it's sort of flat. But, again, if it's going to be a solution that is not necessarily the town planner as it was before, once we know that solution, we can certainly adjust this.
That wasn't so much. My point was more, was it that she was doing 25 hours before and split between these two budgets, or was 25 hours before she moved into doing some of this work? And 25 hours split between the two, and now she's kind of moving all of it back to the town? Or is it that she was doing 20 hours and then added 5 hours?
It was a 30-hour contract that went up to 35-hour contract, including EDC, and then it went back to 30 hours without the EDC.
Okay.
Okay. And by the way, just as an FYI for the committee, if you want to say something, don't forget to raise your hand, especially when Travis is sharing, because I can't see everybody at the same time when he's sharing. So when you raise your hand, it bumps you up to the top of my view. So just as an FYI. Okay. Any other questions about economic development? Okay. Then next up is street lighting. Thank you, Peter.
Okay. Let me pull up street lighting. Yeah. Share screen. Okay. Should I put a little bit of narrative in here again? So both of these get paid to Eversource and Star. This was a budget that I think, if I understand correctly from Sharon, the finance committee wanted the detail broken out, so that we started doing that. The one that fluctuates the most within the budget of street lighting is equipment maintenance. And so that a lot of times goes, essentially when I look at the history of actual bills paid, it's generally paid to Bell Traffic Signal Maintenance, which comes out and deals with these. The general cost per call from Bell Electric is about $575. And then FY20, there was a greater need that hit about $10,000, and I'll scroll down in a second. So the $5,500 budget is a bit of a hedge between the peak, but then also, based on a little bit more of an average use. Overall, we have 923 streetlights and signal lights, the most recent ones being added in 2017, 2018. I put on here a conversation that I know that's been had. I think it's one that we want to continue. But when I look at the conversation about converting streetlights to LED, for me, and this was a conversation that came about, I've discussed this with the facilities manager and the sustainability coordinator and the IT director. And really the issue is if we want to convert the streetlights and force the issue, we end up needing to take on maintenance or ownership of the streetlights, which then puts the liability on us. I think from an ROI standpoint, that makes it very difficult to prioritize this. At the same point, if the cost of doing that, essentially in the beginning is covered through a grant or something like that, maybe the ROI changes and we discuss it. Either way, I think it's more of a capital conversation. I put it in here only to sort of say that the FY22 budget is based on an assumption that we will not convert to LED within the fiscal year. Two other things I note here. We do have, first of all, the facilities manager brought out a 12-month lock that was going to reduce electric rates. So we see the savings here, or the projected savings based on what we've seen so far. And then also there's a slight risk that we know of developments in town that would like to add street lighting. Mayflower Landing is one that requested a waiver of streetlights. Residents there want the streetlights as they were originally promised. And so at some point, those may be coming online once the street is accepted. After that, the town essentially is paying for the streetlights. So again, that's one that is going to impact FY22. And so here's what this looks like. And actually, let me go down to the other view, Sharon's view here, because that shows you the mid-year expenditures. So we are going down slightly in this budget. The actual rate is what we're locking in here and assuming a 5% reduction. And the maintenance, as I said, at $5,500 is more based on average over time, although FY20, what we expended based on needs of calling in Bell, is a liability in this budget to potentially, if we had this usage as we did in 20, we would potentially need a reserve transfer at some point during the fiscal year 22.
By the way, just as an FYI, are people seeing the raise hand function? Because some people are saying they can't find it. I don't know. I don't see it because I'm the host. So okay. So clearly it works because Vin's using it. So, I see. It's next to, is it next to, whatever. Where'd you find it, Vin?
Well, you have to go to the participants and then to the far lower right is where that says raise hand. It's invite, mute me, and lower or raise hand.
Yep. Okay. Okay, good. Okay, so go ahead, Vin. You had your hand up since you figured out how to do it.
Question. What do we use? How come you came out last year, Bell, or 2020? What was going on in 20 versus what we expect going on versus what was extraordinary in 20 for Bell to keep coming out? For equipment maintenance is what I'm looking at, Travis.
Just pull up the backup you did for that.
And I can't raise my hand, by the way. I don't know if I'm.
So you don't get to talk.
Yeah.
That's right. I did that on purpose.
This is done on purpose.
Don't allow him to raise his hand. No, just kidding.
Thank you, Ken. We appreciate that.
Okay, so I'd have to pull up the history through Munis. I didn't save it out in here. I think my recollection from pulling it up, I pulled up the history the other day, and I don't know why it's not in the sheet that I saved out here, but it was more a one large expenditure than it was just frequent calls, right? So the 575 is when I look through the history, is generally speaking what we call it. Like, for example, they were working on the lights across from Cole Court this week. They went out. So that a couple of things are going to happen. One, we're going to pay for them to do that. Two, I'm going to look at the potentially, I saw Cole Court is replacing its septic system, and I'm thinking that there's probably a connection there between that light going out and that work. And so if it was caused by that work, we'll, make sure that they're paying for it. If it was on us, again, it's going to be about a $575 call. I can look at specifically what the large cost in FY20 was. I just don't have it in front of me at the moment.
I'm just curious. So if you could just get back to us. The other thing I think we were bandying about last year was to break out the electricity cost streetlights versus the signals, because we were questioning, was that the draw versus the streetlights? Okay, those are standard, we're there, but the draw of putting in the electricity, there was big jumps from what I recall, over years, and then they put in the signals, especially downtown, and then there was a huge jump, and we were like, we had under budgeted a year or two because nobody had factored that in, so I think we had talked, and people can correct me, about breaking it out, what signaling versus the lights for electricity.
And I believe that's what Sharon did, so that these two separate, right? They both get paid to Eversource / NSTAR as a vendor in the system, but I believe that this is what Sharon did to break out those costs.
I see. So
The top line is the traffic lights and the bottom line is the street lights.
Yes.
okay.
And so again, the biggest chunk we're going to see. So this would have been essentially when those lights went on at the downtown area.
Yep.
And then this is going to be our biggest savings when it comes to streetlights with the rate that the facilities manager locked in for 12 months, which is why I have that decreased here. And then I just increased this based on, to protect us with that increase, although you did see in 20, once it normalized, and that might have been once they sort of optimized it.
Yep. Okay. Just as a suggestion, maybe you can ask the select board to write a letter to our reps and maybe get Eversource to change out the lights to LEDs to be greener and help us. I mean, they're not incentivized.
Exactly. That's exactly why it's been so long, right?
I think we need to have a stick from the State House.
Right. And the other thing I would ask, I'll get to Tim and Sue in just a second. The other thing I was going to add to the streetlight discussion is, are we ensuring that any new lights that are put up in developments like Mayflower Landing, those should be required to be LEDs?
So that was
That's
a
a great
question.
idea.
That was the question that the select board asked the other night, and the sustainability coordinator responded to it. I don't believe in, let's say, the documentation that comes from the planning board or the zoning board that they specify that lighting would need to be LED.
Mayflower Landing may be different because it's already done. What I'm saying is anything they're considering going forward should be LED. That should be in the documentation, that it should be LED. It must be LED lighting, meeting this town's requirements. Just as an FYI, since I know some of the history here, Travis, on the water side, we had that issue years ago with the pipes where developers were just, they'd have a requirement to put in to connect the system, but then the town takes ownership of the pipes. And so we had this discussion probably more than 10 years ago at this point, where we said, we've got to, if we're upgrading all our pipes and putting in the iron pipes and getting rid of AC and, this whole thing, then why are we allowing developers to put in less, inferior pipes that connect to our system? So they started imposing a requirement that basically, if you were going to hook in a town water, you have to put the pipes up to our standards. So I'm just saying we should be doing the same thing with the streetlights going forward. So, okay, Tim.
I think Sue was first. Sorry.
Oh, okay, well, I just did them in the order they showed up on my screen. So
Yeah.
That's okay. I was wondering, once the solar goes in, will that offset any of the lights? Is there any way to tie it into that to offset the cost?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Well, we're putting in the solar plant. And so I was wondering, once that goes in, is there any way to offset the electricity for the lights and the street lights and the regular lights?
From an accounting standpoint, we could discuss how to reflect that at the same point, right? I think as we're getting towards the solar, and we're going to have the conversation probably more on the warrant discussion, but I think, where the conversation went last year was, and where the select board is now, is the major component, the lease and the pilot payment, would hit the general fund. So, that revenue alone will more than offset this entire budget. One of the things that I have discussed that I'll probably be bringing to the select board and you in the future is the third and the smallest revenue component of the solar project, which is net metering. The net metering will fluctuate year to year based on the output of that solar field. And, if there's a way that it can sort of improve service through a revolving fund at the recycling center is one solution I'm looking at. So it wouldn't offset this. But again, the revenue that will be hitting the general fund through the solar is probably in the 400,000 plus range. Will completely offset this budget.
Okay. And then the other thing, just to follow on with what Vin was saying, I do think it would be helpful to see what made up the 2020 numbers. I would presume that if there was maintenance, that this year would be less, just because if you are servicing the lights, then they probably don't need to be serviced again. And where it was so low the prior 2 years, it would be good just to see what, if there was something unique that came into play, and maybe the 5,500 actually is too high.
Okay.
That was it.
Okay. Now you can go, Tim.
Travis, can you remind me what is this Mayflower Landing agreement between a developer and the town?
So we have two. Actually, they approached me about a road acceptance on our October, then became December 5th town meeting. They wanted a road accepted, but we won't do it until they've matched everything that the planning board set forward with them. Mayflower Landing is by a developer named Fafford, who's elsewhere in town. For that particular road acceptance, one of the things before we would accept it was that they need to put in streetlights. They asked for a waiver, which can be granted through the select board. So they brought it to the select board, the sort of request. There's interest from the people who live there, who always assume the streetlights were going to be put in, that it be done, and the developer be required to do that. So the select board did not approve that waiver. They need to do that. They would like the road to be accepted as early as our May town meeting. So, there's going to be a little bit of follow through on that. If they get everything lined up and the planning board tells me we're comfortable that they've done everything they need to, you can put it on the road acceptance on town meeting. Then, we'll have those lights potentially turned over to us as early as following our May town meeting.
Would we end up owning those lights, or will those go over to, so we'll end up owning these lights?
Yep.
Okay.
We'll end up paying the electricity. The lights will be owned by Eversource.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Thank you. That's kind of what I was curious about. Kind of switching topics just a little bit. It looks like we're spending about 58,000, budgeting for 55,000 in electricity. How much would we be spending if we had switched over to LED? Like, what's the cost savings?
I don't know that specifically. Again, my, yeah,
engineer.
I think 20% is a reasonable sort of ballpark.
I think it'll be more like 70% or more.
So, I think, again, to Vin's point earlier, on the letter to the congressional delegation or sort of our state house reps, I think that's the way to go, quite honestly. If the ROI can work, if we're not the one shelling out the original capital costs, if all of that gets covered and then all we're doing is sort of taking on the liability and really that risk, the Maya budget, potentially all of that becomes our assets that need to be maintained, and somebody hits one with a car and it's covered through our Maya coverage, right? That's then becomes our financial risk. I think then the ROI works, but somebody needs to pay for the upfront. So those are the grants that I'm going to be going for, asking for, some things that are in the bond bills that we can sort of go for funding. That changes the economics of it for us. And then I think we can have that conversation. Again, my only point for bringing it up in this conversation is that I'm just telling you this budget is based on the assumption that no LED conversion happens within the fiscal year.
Right. I just kind of want to understand, like, when is there an idea of when there's got to be a break point, right, where all of a sudden it does become more economically feasible for us to own and switch over to LED, take care of that maintenance. Do we know when that is? Are we like a third of the way to it because we're so small, or?
I don't think anybody's ever done that analysis, Tim, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's what we were asking about. Like this topic. I mean, I personally have been mentioning LED lights for at least a decade. Right. So it's been out there. there are many other potential benefits to LED lighting, because it can be much more targeted than the streetlights we have. So you could some of the modern street lighting technology with LEDs can literally light up the road like it's daylight, and the sides would be completely dark, so people wouldn't get stray light, things like that. You could do all sorts of, as I said, improve the lighting on the streets, and also improve the energy efficiency tremendously. The question is, someone has got to go down that path of saying, okay, here's the report that's going to look at this. What happens if you take ownership of the lighting? What happens if you? But fundamentally, Vin hit on the key point, which is at this point in time, and for the last N years, Eversource has had absolutely no incentive to convert the lights to be more energy efficient, because they make more money when they're inefficient. So,
right.
So that's why I said it's not one of these things that NSTAR is going to come to us one day, or Eversource is going to come to us one day and say, hey, guess what? We're going to upgrade all the lights in town, because they would pay all the money to do the upgrade and then collect far less from us in revenue in return.
This isn't something we could do through changing our zoning bylaws or our building.
Well, the pole requirement doesn't. Travis can speak to this, but that doesn't require. Requiring new developments to use LED lighting, we can impose. That's
right.
The question is, what do you do about all the lights you already have, right? Those are not going to go anywhere anytime soon.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So I think we're in better position to tackle this than we were previously with sustainability coordinator. I think we can prioritize sort of looking at what is the original cost, what is the cost to us going forward, right? I can get sort of I can speak with Maya, have the cost of what this is going to do to our coverage, right? To Dan's earlier question on why we go up so much when we acquire these assets, it needs to be folded in. We can put all of that together. And so, I think between Matt Zedek and myself, and the IT director, who's put a lot of thought into this previously as well, I think we're moving towards the ability to sort of have a decision that people can act on. There's quite a few moving components here. And then so the other part is that Eversource, right, to Ken's point, is they make more money off of us by having these inefficient lights. At the same point, they are getting pushed by the DPU, which oversees private and public electric companies in Massachusetts and the country. And they do need to find efficiencies that they need to prove on a certain basis, on an annual basis, that they're sort of making strides in. So there's a number of factors we can sort of go after. If we could get them to replace them while continuing to own them, that would be my preference. And if that's not going to happen, then we'll move on to Plan B.
Yeah. Well, the other option is again, this is why you need to study the various options, because one of the options might be, what if we went to Eversource and said, okay, we'll pay for this work to be done. We'll basically give you the lights, but the requirement is that you maintain them. We'll do the capital purchase. Again, you got to do the math. Does it make sense? How many years does it take to pay back that cost if you do that? In other words, we've always looked at we own it or we own it and they're efficient, or we don't own it and they're inefficient. And there might be some way to get a middle ground there of they still own them, but they're efficient, right? Because we incur the cost, not them, or something like that. So, but that we'll leave that up to Travis to further investigate. But budget-wise, anybody else have any other questions on the budget particulars? Okay. If not, then we'll get to the last budget of the night, which is the rail trail. And we have all the, are you going to cover that one too, Travis, and just have them there for support, or Robert, you're going to do it? Okay.
We'll pull it up for them.
Okay.
If I can.
Good evening. We have a modest request of $1,000, keeping it the same as last year. And most of our budget will go to maintenance equipment for the 6.7 miles of rail trail. We do have a shed at the highway department that we have inside there. It's a golf cart, and a number of pieces of equipment, mainly chainsaws, leaf blowers, and other equipment as well in there. And so most of our maintenance is going to be associated with cutting back the vegetation. We do get a lot of support from the highway department in terms of the any major trees that are dangerous that we we as volunteers can't take care of. We do have the highway department help us out at that point. And then also the highway department does help out in terms of maintaining the signals that we've installed at the various intersections. So like I say, it's a modest $1,000 budget, and we keep it the same as this year. And like if we have any other major projects, we'll go seek other alternatives. We've been very successful going to the Mass Trails program, which is a state funding where we provide the match using a lot of volunteer help, and that way we can use less of the town funds. But that's basically all there is to the $1,000 request. If you have any specific questions, or Ken's also on the phone call if he has anything to add.
Okay, Mr. Maxwell?
Is this the first year we have an official budget for this? In the past, has it been a separate request?
Yes, we had to, remember there was a warrant article last May. Right. And then we said, I talked to Robert separately and said, look, if you're going to ask for this every year, we don't need a separate warrant article. We should just make it a budget line. And so that's what we did. So this is the first time we're seeing this as an official budget.
I think this is a great continuous improvement. And Robert, I know the volunteers that are working to maintain the trail I greatly appreciate it. And I think the trail adds tremendous value to the town. So thank you very much for all that effort.
You're welcome. And Ken leads the maintenance crew, so it's good to have Ken there as well to hear this.
Retired the other Ken, just for the record. I don't want to take credit away from the other Ken. So, okay. Mr. Murphy.
Yeah, I don't want to ask any questions, but just thank both of them for all the work they do. It's great. I go out there fairly regularly, and just seeing how many people are out there, either people from our town or other towns, and everybody loves it. So I think you guys did a great job putting it together and going and getting the grants, and thank you for all that great asset to the town.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments? I will just say the one question I had, which is really not budget related, but is more just about goings on the trail, which is where do I know that we finished our entire segment, a year or two ago, a couple of years ago at this point. I know Milford did a lot. Last time I went, I haven't been there in a while because of COVID and everything, but last time I went towards the Sherborne end, right? It was the dead end into Sherborne, and I know there was a lot of, do we know yet what the plans are, or has there been any work on the other parts in the other towns?
Yes, this is Robert Wydeck. The town of Sherborne actually purchased the piece of land that goes to the Whitney Street Bridge. That Whitney Street turns to Elliott Street. They purchased it and they got a grant to fund the construction of it, but they ran into an issue with a vernal pool. There's some drainage that was illegally discharged into the right-of-way, and it created a vernal pool in the center part of the trail. And so they're going to have to redesign and possibly go up onto the abutting property to the west and go around that. From that point, it's active from Whitney Street, it's active railroad that CSX still owns. They had anticipated selling it maybe a year or so ago. They've now changed their mind, and some of their operations people want to maintain it. But there is some interest on the state level. The MAPC, Metropolitan Area Planning Council, is looking at making this part of the East Coast Greenway, which is a greenway that runs from Florida to Maine. And so they're looking to alter that intended design path where it was originally planned to go up through the Worcester area. They're looking at coming along through Milford, Holliston, Framingham, or Sherborne, Framingham, and then tie into the Bruce Freeman Trail that goes from Framingham all the way to Lowell. But that's discussions, and so I don't know if the state will end up taking over that and buying that land that's in Framingham, the last 2 or so 3 miles that runs from Whitney Street, Sherborne, all the way to the downtown Framingham line. Other towns are actively pursuing their connections to the trail. The Ashland doesn't connect directly to us, but it connects through into Sherborne, just north of Whitney Street. And so they're looking at making connections, and they've hired a consultant to look at designs and alternatives. And I think they're actually going to start construction of a small segment that gets them over close to the trail, but not directly to it. Hopkinton is also has hired a consultant to look at the various alternatives. Their right-of-way has been very much pieced, sold off, and there was a railroad that was unsuccessful many years ago, and so a lot of it was sold off. But they've built bits and pieces of trail along the corridor, the railroad corridor. There's the Echo Trail. It's closest to the Milford line. There's another piece that goes up behind the high school. It's called the Center Trail that goes to 135. But they're trying to recreate that corridors, and where they can't, they're going to go on street in some parts. But they're actively working on it. But it looks like it's going to be years from now. Because I just remember how it kind of dead ended right at the Sherborne line and just wondering if anything had happened there. So, okay, thank you. Any other last questions for the rail trail folks? I would echo what was said already, which is, obviously I think that's a very valuable asset to the town, and you guys are doing a great job creating it and maintaining it. And it's a good investment for $1,000 a year. So thank you very much. You're welcome.
So, okay. Yes, I guess you're all set. You don't have to hang out and
all right.
Let us bore you anymore.
Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So that's it for budget reviews for tonight. As I said, tonight's, the first couple of weeks we all know are relatively light budget wise. So we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is any updates from Travis. So you have anything for us, Travis? Any good, exciting news?
No, I did a 6-month sort of update. January 20th was inauguration, and then my 6-month mark in town. And I did a 6-month mid-year review that I put online, and I can send that to the group. That held, there's a lot of things that have sort of been going on, but are really just mid-process. So it was a lot, but it was good to go through and sort of check in on a number of different items. Any of those things that are of interest, obviously just reach out. I would just point out, I sent out to the group today a couple just small tweaks, nothing that impacts your schedule. The select board budget, we did not review last night because one of the things that I reached out to the liaisons affected by this is that the public buildings and facilities management budget are going to have some structural tweaks to it. So I'm going to move the select board budget down to be discussed at the same night as those. You just did all of these, obviously. Select board will do zoning, building inspection on Monday night because it's going to be a very busy other agenda besides budgets. You will have that. And then the other thing I think we mentioned is I'm going to try to throw in some Thursday nights to keep the select board on an aggressive timeline with budget reviews to get back to you. So I sent this to the group, and everybody has this. Again, we're trying to keep everybody on the original schedule that have gone out. So I think at the moment, everything that you had on your original schedule stays intact. Other than that, I'll send the mid-year review for everybody, and if anybody has questions, they can let me know.
Yeah, and I should point out for the committee that we have all the budgets for our next meeting. You should already have them. They were sent out, the town clerk and election budgets we got a week or so ago. Karen sent out the planning board and ZBA budget, and Travis has already given us the sealer and solid waste budgets there in the Google Drive folder. So anybody that wants to review can review well in advance of the meeting next week. So,
great.
Okay, Ms. Hine, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say last night we did the performance review or evaluation for Travis. So if you get a chance, I'd encourage you to kind of read the minutes or go back and watch the video. It was overall a glowing evaluation of Travis. So I just wanted to share with you that performance evaluation was done and that the comments were, again, overwhelmingly positive. And it's with great appreciation for his service of the past 6 months that I want to broadcast that as loudly as possible. So I thought I'd share it here.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Certainly nice having a town administrator that actually responds to us on a timely basis and gives us the information we want. So we certainly appreciate your efforts.
And attends the meetings too.
Yeah, I was going to say,
yes,
at our meetings.
The whole meeting. Yes.
And not just,
But, okay, so that's it for updates, Travis?
That's all I have right now.
Okay. Okay, any other liaison updates? I just have one quick one I'll start with, which is Dan has been working to try to get a meeting with the budget subcommittee of the schools. We're going to hopefully be meeting with them soon to start kicking off their budget. We haven't met with them. We pinged them a couple of times and they've been tied up with some other things. But we're trying to get that arranged. And the other thing I was going to say was I did hear from Chief Stone. He's already, I haven't met with him yet, but I'm going to be meeting with him soon to start talking about the police budget. Other than that, I don't have anything myself. Mr. Maxwell, you have your hand up. So why don't you give us?
So I realize the last meeting, I missed a significant portion of it. I don't know if Mark had a chance to relay our meeting with the Council on Aging. Mark, were you able to?
Yeah, he did.
So then the only other liaison, it's not really liaison, but the capital subcommittee, we're going to be starting to meet again on Thursdays to work on the report that Mr. Sparrow had drafted and proposed, and I think it's a good move forward. There's some details in there I think we're going to all need to reach consensus on before we bring that to the town, but hopefully in May, so stay tuned.
Okay. Any other updates? Go ahead, Dan, you're about to say something.
do we have a liaison to the governance committee? Should we appoint one? And
I believe we do. I believe we took care of that.
It's Vin, isn't it?
I think it's Vin. Yeah.
No, we never did because
we never did. Hold on. Let me.
No, it wasn't.
I
volunteered.
Because I know they keep saying they're going to come talk to us, but they have.
Well, I've been in touch with Sam because he mentioned that. He said that he did say that they wouldn't be ready till February sometime. I asked him, I said to him, I know you guys have been discussing draft provisions, and I asked him if I could receive a copy, and he said, well, they're not prepping them yet. And then I said, well, I would like to see them as they evolve because I want to know who's requesting changes and what changes are being made. And he basically said that the first official draft, so to speak, will be going out to all departments, all departments at the same time. So
I mean, they're talking about these drafts in open meetings, so I'm not entirely sure that's a.
I concur. I didn't want to press him on that, but I felt the same way. Right? If it's an open session meeting, we should be able to see what they're discussing.
I mean, is there any way to sort of? I mean, it feels like they're going full steam ahead with a lot of input, maybe from the select board, but not in even discussing sort of some rather large changes, even if it's just the timing of the capital request with us. And I think there's a lot of reasons for the things that are done, and it's important before you get to the finish line.
And I've expressed that sentiment to Sam. Obviously, I'm just expressing my opinion, but I've said to Sam the same thing, which is, if you're proposing, it's not going to be good if you get all the way down the end of the road and then at the last minute say, okay, here's what we're proposing, and then expect to, this is supposed to be a process where they propose something and the boards and committees have an opportunity to provide feedback, to get updates made, things like that, to reach a consensus before town meeting, as opposed to just saying this is what we came up with and take it or leave it type thing. So yes, I agree. I would like to see what they're discussing. You are correct. I did check. We don't have an official liaison for that. Would somebody like to be the official liaison for that? I know, Mr. Murphy, you've been going to all the meetings, haven't you?
No, I have not since. I haven't for the last couple months.
Okay. I thought somebody was. You don't want to keep sending the emails about.
I haven't gone since I was burnt out after our last town meeting. So I've kind of taken it back, and so I can. And I want to get burned. I was gonna say, you want to get burned out again? I could. If you want me to go, I'll be the liaison. Yeah, I go ahead, Travis.
I would just say the last time I understood that they plan on doing the FinCom School Committee, Select Board, and finance officers again to review when they're ready to do it. I have not seen that go to the Select Board as any format. I guess it hasn't come to you, but it sounds like based on timeline to hit the March 29th deadline for warrant articles that everybody's aware of. I would expect that to be coming soon.
Yeah. Well, as I said, to Dan's point, the concern is that if they meet that deadline without, and again, I'm not indicting them. They haven't done anything yet, right? But I'm just saying you want to, obviously it's very important to us what they come out with, right? It should be important to the select board and any other board too. So we just don't want it to be something where it gets dropped in mid-March with a 1 week window or something to get it on the warrant. And then we're being told that, changes can't be made or things like that, right? The process should be that they propose something that gets fully vetted by all the affected boards before it gets on the warrant. So, Vin, if you want to do that, then we'll sign you up for that.
Sure.
Okay.
Unless somebody else wants to.
Please request the drafts again, because those are open documents. If they're discussing like a physically written draft of some sort, that
should be available, right?
That is clearly something that should be in the open domain, and it is not.
Well,
nor is it available if you email them, apparently. So,
right. Well, I tried.
Yes.
Okay. So, any other liaison updates or anything like that? Now we get to see the most formally dressed attendee, Mr. Cassidy, if he wants to give us the update on the current COVID situation and if he's still awake after all these budget reviews.
He's still awake. Don't you worry. Chief Cassidy, for the record. In terms of our COVID update, we are on the tail end of the second surge. We continue to have a good supply of PPE on hand. We continue to get updates from both the state and federal partners. I just got an update today from FEMA regarding some changes, how they plan to reimburse costs associated with vaccine administration. So we just try to stay current with all of the rules as they get changed by the different agencies and administrations.
Okay, now, Chief, there was something I read, and forgive me if I say this incorrectly because I don't have it in front of me, but I read, I think it was last week when Biden took office, that one of his executive orders ordered FEMA to increase reimbursement to 100% for COVID-related expenses.
Not COVID-related expenses. That would be for vaccine administration.
Oh, vaccine administration. I knew it was something related to COVID. So,
so for vaccine administration from January 21st, 2021 forward, the reimbursement rate would be 100% for any vaccination administration expenses incurred prior to January 21st, 2001. It's still the 75%.
Okay. So with regards to the vaccine, I know you're plugged into a lot of the discussions. One thing that's been very disappointing to me at the state level is that other than that one little slide that they have saying, when do you get vaccinated, there's been almost zero real information about, how many vaccines are getting out there. There's talk about mass vaccination sites in Foxborough, Gillette and stuff like this, but it seems like, I guess what I'm saying is, like, do we have any clue as to, are we going to get any vaccine? Is it just going to go to the major vaccine centers? The state's doing very little communication with the public about the state of the vaccine other than saying you can't get it yet or you can get it.
So for the current operating period, the state has been receiving about 89,000 doses per week from the federal inventory. And once they get their allotment from the federal government, they dole that out to the locations that are actively doing vaccine administration, and they make those disbursements based on a combination of what those locations still have on hand, what their capacity is to continue to give shots in the next 10 days, and the number of appointments that they have already booked, because they don't want to have any shots going to waste. Right. So you're not alone. There are a lot of end users who are frustrated with the delays between the feds and the state, and then the state and the local. 351 cities and towns, each one of them had the opportunity to come up with a vaccination program that would either include themselves, would include other municipal partners, would include private enterprises. So when you go to the state website, which the map was updated today, there continue to be new sites that are being populated. There were some sites that were only doing first responders and then we're closing up shop. There are other locations, healthcare centers, community health centers, pharmacies that weren't involved in phase 1, but will likely be involved in phase 2 and phase 3. So it's really an evolving landscape in terms of the distribution channels from week to week. They have indicated that phase 2, the first set of phase 2, which is individuals 75 and older, will begin February 1st. And as of tomorrow, Wednesday, the 27th of January, individuals 75 and over can make appointments through the web portal for starting February 1st.
Okay. Yeah, because as I said, it's one of these things where it's such a, I mean, I understand it's not the state's fault, right? There was federal issues in getting vaccine coordination as well, but it just seems like, you know, at the state level, there's, if they said tomorrow, just to give you an example, if they said to me tomorrow, okay, you know, you're eligible for getting vaccinated, I wouldn't even know where to go, where to sign up. Do I go to my doctor? Do I go to Gillette Stadium? Do I go to CVS? You know, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I'm thinking about is, you know, it just seems, again, I don't want to, not necessarily financial related, but it's more related to, you know, a base question of will there ever be vaccination clinics in Holliston, for example, right? I think it's too early to know.
Based on the requirements to operate a vaccine clinic, it is not my expectation that the town of Holliston or any of its departments will be actively distributing the vaccine.
Okay.
I can't speak to whether or not CVS will offer it in the future or whether any medical offices will offer it in phase 3, but I can tell you based on the storage requirements,
right,
based on the reporting requirements, based on the administrative requirements, that the existing health department does not have the capacity or the bandwidth to be able to operate a vaccine clinic in Holliston.
Okay, Sue, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Chief, you had said that we are at the tail end of the second surge, but the numbers in Holliston appear to continue to go up, and we still are in the red zone. What sort of gives you the assurance that we're in the tail end of that second surge?
Although the numbers are going up, the rate at which they're going up is what's offering me that indication that we're tapering off. And,
okay.
And also it's consistent with region-wide and statewide numbers as well.
It is. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Mark, you had a question?
Yeah, Chief, I think you said 89,000 doses per week. Is
Yes.
that the correct number?
That is correct.
So just roughly based on, 4 million people needing it, which is a rough guess. Obviously, I have no idea how many adults there actually are in Massachusetts, but if 4 million people need it, that's most of a year. Is that going to be accelerated at some point in time?
Again, this is based on the federal availability. I do know that there has been indications at the federal level that they have committed to acquiring additional doses from the manufacturers who have received the emergency use authorization, which will put more into the pipeline. Right now, the other consideration that you also need to remember is that including in those doses are not only first doses, but also second doses. So although they're getting 89,000, we're now at the point where we're deep enough into phase 1 that some of that allotment is committed to second shots. So it's not 89,000 unique individuals, it's fewer than that.
Thanks.
Sure.
I mean, it sounds absurd, but should I take up smoking to try to advance myself on?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's all another. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Maxwell, you had your hand up, but I accidentally lowered it. So go ahead. You're muted, Tim.
One day I'll get the hold of this Zoom thing. Chief Cassidy, it's been a very long time since I've looked at the guides on how we can spend CARES money, but I think I remember there was a, we could use it on distributing food for seniors. Is that true?
Yes, food for families is an eligible CARES expense. And a few weeks ago, the select board did vote to cover some expenses that had been incurred by the Council on Aging from July 1st to December 31st to assist with their meal distribution program.
Yeah, Tim, the conversation we had with you and Mark and the COA, they put that request forward, the select board approved that, and that's been all settled.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay.
That actually, just to point that out, because I know, Tim and Mark mentioned that earlier in the COA. It's a great example of something that we're going to see going into FY22 budgets when we talk about change in approach. Most of the meals that used to be delivered, or most of the meals that are delivered by the COA were delivered with people coming there and eating all in a room. Going into FY22, they're going to be probably assuming the use of continuing to deliver those meals instead, right? So the way that their budget looks and the way that they've built it is going to look a little bit differently. Catching that within this budget cycle, as Tim just referenced, was an issue that sort of caught them off guard, and CARES was able to sort of offset it slightly.
Okay, Mr. Alfred.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Just on to Mark's point, 89,000. I know they're supposed to increase that, but also remember, it's only approved for one is approved for 18 plus, and the other approved for 16 plus, and then you're not going to have everyone get it, obviously, right? So people who want it, I think, will be able to probably get it sooner than a year. But anyway, the question I have is, what do we have left of CARES money?
I can tell you, and I would refer you to Mr. Ahern's 6-month update, because he gave a high-level overview to the board with regards to where we were looking at the CARES money that had come in both on the municipal side as well as on the school side. And we are in the process right now of reconciling to ensure that we know who's going to cover what expense. So I can tell you we haven't spent it out completely because we got the reprieve on December 28th that told us we didn't need to spend it all by December 30th. But I don't have an exact figure for you, but I would refer you to Mr. Ahern's 6-month update because that gave a high-level overview as of last week.
Do you want to put that up on the screen?
I'll take a plus or minus 50,000 ballpark. I'm not looking for an exact number. It's not a lot, right? Okay. So 200.
That said, these are our ongoing monthly expenses for the bank.
I can't tell. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so subtract another, what is that, 120 from that, call it, to get us through mid-year or whatever. Or I guess this is, something just, so we have
120, and we may get, so if you get the FEMA reimbursement right, that means we're what, 315? So
that aggregate looks at both the municipal CARES money as well as the schools large per pupil, 225 per pupil formula grant. So what's on the right side is municipal spending. I can't tell you what the run rate is for the schools' ongoing expenses that would be charged towards their 604.
Okay, wait. So this isn't just so this isn't just the town side. This is the schools too. All right. So this actually brings me into the question. So last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever the heck it was, the select board approved $15,000 for the schools for a PCR machine and testing supplies. Correct?
The board voted up to $15,000 for testing equipment and supplies, or an alternative testing option.
Okay. That's good to hear that there's that alternative. Though I think that look, I'm a little embarrassed to say this because again, we haven't had our budget subcommittee meeting, which has been a little bit of a frustration. But is that in that number? First of all, has that been sort of subtracted out of that number? Okay. And then my other point, I've been trying to make this sort of, to some school committee members, is that was there any plan presented to the select board about how to do it? Because we all know that if you're going to do a real surveillance testing program, you need someone to actually do it. And if you're currently staffed at a level where with nurses and whatnot, that is what you need, then that means you do not have people to run around taking testing samples, running it through the PCR machine itself, and doing the testing. And to me, that it would seem like if you're running an actual surveillance program with one machine, you're probably running that machine all day, which means there's somebody who's doing that work all day, which means that you need an additional hire, at a minimum one additional hire. And my concern is, and again, I wanted to take this up with the school committee or the budget subcommittee, but we've been anyway.
Recently, yes, go ahead.
We haven't met recently, but my concern is that there's no real plan from them to doing this, and that we're just sort of authorizing money to go buy a machine that's nice and shiny, and we're not necessarily set up or prepared for what the long-term costs are going to be. And it's not that, and that's not to say that this isn't a good idea or a bad idea, but when we're fleshing out the cost and we're looking at whether to buy the machine or just hire somebody to do it from the outside, it seems like we should be putting together a more holistic sort of idea of the cost.
Yeah.
So I understand your concerns, and this was the sort of thing that came up with regards to the Binex Now, Abbott Binex Now testing that they had available from DESE. What was billed as a free testing option had additional costs to it. So in the same way, the use case for a PCR or similar testing machine, plus the additional supplies, there does still need to be fleshed out a little bit more of an operational plan and what that would look like and how it would be utilized. And their request was not for a surveillance program. It was more for if somebody came to school feeling well and later on didn't feel well, this would be the sort of thing where we could test them.
Or are you just pondering the universe?
Right away. Because I agree, surveillance is a very difficult and cumbersome process. But all of this right now is philosophical because the distributor is not currently accepting new customers or orders. So although an authorization for CARES funds has been made, there is no ability for us to make that equipment acquisition at this time.
Well, that's good. And I would, it's not really, I don't really have the authority to do this, but before we actually do buy a machine, if we ever get it, maybe we could hold off until we all sort of talk about this and figure out whether, because my gut is it's not going to be just CARES money that we're going to end up needing to use for this. And so therefore it will be in the finance committee's purview at some point, whether it's a line item transfer request or for next year's budgeting or something like that, that there will be a non-CARES component to it. And it's interesting that you say that this was not for surveillance. I actually just assumed it was for surveillance because you're actually buying a fairly large, expensive piece of equipment. If it's not for surveillance, the Binex Now thing are from my understanding, and I'm not a medical at anything, but I do a lot of reading because I'm an analyst, is that for a symptomatic patient, a Binex Now kit is a very easy, simple, fairly accurate test for somebody that is exhibiting symptoms, and that you would obviously want to follow up with a PCR sort of test, but that could be done out of the school. But that it's 90% plus if you're for a symptomatic patient. It's not good for surveillance. It's not good for for asymptomatic individuals. So again, if that it really is for testing in school symptomatic patients, that seems like a wholesome waste of money, in my opinion.
I don't want to overly simplify it. It's not just for testing only of symptomatic, and I agree the Binex now is a good rapid test, but they will tell you that anytime you get a positive result from a rapid test, it needs to be followed up with a PCR.
Right, but my point is, I'm not sure that anyway. We can get.
Yeah, I was going to say we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. Let them. They've made the proposal. There's the CARES funds component. Your point was that there's a non-CARES fund component.
My point is they haven't actually made a proposal. They've just sort of stated something that they want, and
well, that's what I meant. They've asked what they want. They haven't come forth with the whole operation.
I'm glad to hear we can't buy it now, because I think that there needs to be more work done before we do.
Right.
I agree.
Okay, so Tina, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to add that when the school committee came before the select board with that request, Dr. Kuska, I thought she'd made it pretty clear that, they were looking for the approval for the CARES Act money while they were actively exploring all options. And so that our approval was to give them the ability to green light a purchase when they made a decision. So I just wanted to share that was sort of my interpretation of how it was presented, and certainly why we approved it was to be proactive, to give them the chance that when they made a decision about the type of testing they wanted to have in place, they'd have the money there if they made that choice, but that they were exploring other options, as I think Chief Cassidy kind of alluded to.
Tina, I in the past and probably in the future, I've been critical of certain things that the select board has done. In this case, it was not meant to be critical of what you guys did. It was more sort of the schools need to be thinking through this. That's not really, I think it was prudent to sort of put some money aside to sort of explore, but just that, I think the more fulsome exploration needs to be done by the schools.
Fair enough. And I was just indicating that was also my understanding, is that they were exploring other options. Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, Chief Cassidy, you shouldn't have to raise your hand, but I guess you do.
and just as a follow-up to Dan's comments, although the intention of the machine was to reside at the schools, and that was in anticipation of there would be the largest location in town where it was expected that the tests would need to be conducted, they had also made it perfectly clear that they wanted to be in partnership with the municipal side of our operations, so that if we had employees at another department who may have possibly been exposed and were having a hard time getting a test, they would make that testing available on the municipal side for people that met certain criteria. Again, not just surveillance screening, but for a specific purpose. So it wasn't going to exclusively be just on the school side, but obviously heavily utilized on the school side. And, we had talked about what resources would be available to assist them from the municipal side in administering and utilizing the equipment.
Chief, it was very, very generous of them to offer to share the expenses with you.
So, okay, Mr. Maxwell.
So I'm very biased in this conversation as both a biochemist and as a spouse of a teacher. I'm all for schools doing what they need to keep the staff and their families and the students safe. And I applaud the support that the select board gave to the schools in doing so. However, I have significant concerns about any development of medical testing by the schools, which should be performed by licensed medical labs.
Yeah, well, I think that's a very valid concern, but before we get too down the road of assuming, let's wait until, Dan's point was, let's see the plan, right? And I think that's what we have to do. So let's wait to see what they propose. I think if they come in and say, we want to buy a machine and we're going to have a secretary in the central office run it, then we have some concerns,
Yeah, I want to support this too. I've been saying surveillance from the very beginning is a key component to this, because I know the schools keep talking about the fact that there is no school spread, and it irks me greatly, because I think that while it is true that they may be able to say we have seen no evidence, or that there's, we don't have direct sort of evidence of school spread, I think that anyone definitively stating that there has been no school spread without real sort of a real testing program, it can't definitively say that.
Yes, but if there's one thing we learned from the last administration is if you don't test, you can say anything you want.
If you don't test, there is no COVID. Absolutely.
That's right. So, okay. Any other questions for the chief? This was, the update. Okay, go ahead, Michelle.
I have to physically, by the way, I Googled it. I have to uninstall the app and reinstall it. So
Oh, okay.
our next meeting, I'll be all taken care of. Is the double masking thing a real thing? Do you know anything about it? Is that something we should be doing?
I did actually allude to that during my report to the select board last evening. They are still researching what the best practices are going to be with regards to single mask versus double masking, whether it's two of one type, one of one and one of another. Stay tuned. I think you're going to see some new recommendations coming out in the coming weeks.
Okay, I'm just nervous that the governor is easing things now when we have other strains coming in. It seems really,
Especially when they're here.
Right. It just seems really premature that numbers are getting slightly better and all of a sudden things are getting eased. It just.
So at first, Michelle, I thought that the double masking was more of an aesthetics thing because people wanted the medical, N95 mask, but then they wanted to have purple flamingos or something on the outside so they could see. But it actually does. I've been doing a lot of reading. It does seem like a cloth mask anyway will fit better to your face and will sort of keep everything sort of together. So then if you have the medical mask that's actually doing the filtering and the cloth mask or even a surgical mask over it, you get a better fit.
Well, the one thing I would say is the right answer is N95 masks for everybody. The whole reason for for the regular cloth masks in the first place was a lack of supply of N95s, right? The healthcare providers needed them. The answer to everything is if you get N95 masks to everybody or widely available to everybody wears those. The simple math is this, right? If the best cloth mask is 70% effective and you double it, you're going to go up to 91% effective or something like that, right? So an N95 still beats that, and it's easier to use, and that kind of thing. So I think that it's a stopgap solution to do double masking and things, and that may be why they're going to propose it. But I think ultimately, and this is what remains to be seen about the federal response, right? If we get to the point where, like it was before the pandemic, where you could go to Home Depot and buy a box of 20 N95 masks for, $15, right? Then you mandate N95 masks for people, and this thing, it'll have a much more dramatic impact on spread, because then it'll be not only you preventing yourself from infecting others, but you'll also be blocking the particles from getting to you effectively.
So people not wearing masks. So,
Oh, yeah.
Well, we had shelves full of them at the office for when we were sanding and doing all that in the shop.
Yeah. So go ahead, Sue.
Yeah, sorry, this is not financial related, but I was wondering, Chief, if you know when someone gets the vaccine, are they now not able to transmit the virus, or they just don't get the virus?
So the research is suggesting that if they were to be exposed to the virus, that if they had gone through the successful course of the vaccine, that it would minimize their symptoms personally, but it is still not clear that it would prevent them from passing it on to somebody else.
Okay.
We're going to find that out soon, right? That's one of the things that usually comes in the later parts of a vaccine study that we don't have yet, right? But as I think Tim and I were talking about this at the December 5th town meeting, right? You're going to know in the first 100,000 or million doses what the reactions are. You're going to have so much data from this vaccine already, just from the millions of doses that have been administered, that the data will start bearing it out very soon, right? You'll start to see what happens to people that have gotten the vaccine. Do their infection rates disappear? Do they find that, because you'll get all that data. It's just that because it wasn't rushed in the sense that they did go through, phase 1, 2, and 3 trials, but the honest truth about something like this is that, especially the Pfizer and the Moderna ones that are mRNA based, those have been in research for a very long time. And the one, if you want to call it a positive, the one positive about the pandemic is this has given them infinitely more data than they ever would have had on how effective these vaccines are. And the good news is if they are really effective and they do work, they're essentially programmable vaccines. And so that would change vaccines, I think, going forward for a lot of diseases, because, that's like they talk about the variant strains, right? It's not that hard to quote unquote reprogram an mRNA vaccine. And that's where the benefit of the technology comes in. It just there hasn't been an urgent need for it to see the light of day like there was now. So, out of all this may come some good. We may have an ability to make vaccines much quicker in the future. So,
but the people in phase 3 might be getting the Johnson & Johnson ones.
Yeah, well, that's all. They won't be getting the AstraZeneca one because they discontinued development of that today. But
no,
is AstraZeneca? Yeah,
Merck.
Oh, Merck, right.
And
AstraZeneca is approved in Europe.
Oh, right, that's right. AstraZeneca is the one that they're having supply problems with in the EU or something like that.
Yeah, Merck was not part of Operation Warp Speed either.
Yeah. So, okay. So any other questions? We kind of went on the whole vaccine discussion here, but any other questions for the chief? Okay, and you don't have to put this whole vaccine discussion in the minutes, Mark. So just for the record. Okay, thank you, chief.
My
Keep
pleasure.
up the good work.
Thank you, chief.
Okay. Last on our agenda is anything related to the FY22 budget. Obviously Travis we did our budget reviews, so I don't know if there's anything additional that anybody has, Travis or anybody else has, concerning the FY22 budget. There are no major updates that I know of. The state hasn't said anything really notable yet about FY22, so there's nothing to really talk about there. Anybody have anything else? If so, raise your hand. Okay, I'm seeing none. So if that's the case, then I'll give everybody one last opportunity. If you have anything you want to say it now. Otherwise, I'll entertain the motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, that's not subject to debate. So we'll proceed immediately to a vote. Mr. Alfred?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Ms. Zemer?
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That concludes the Tuesday, January 26th, 2021 meeting of the Finance Committee. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll be meeting again next Tuesday at 7 p.m. to continue our budget reviews, and our budget review schedule, I think, is posted somewhere, but it's in our agenda, so that at the very least you can see what budgets we're reviewing next week. But for tonight, we're done. So thank you and good night.